Hi, my name is Kat McGuire,
Hey,
and
Kate. Oh, good Irish
hey,
name.
Ciaron. Yes, Kathleen McGuire. I'm definitely Irish. I will be going to Ireland in about 2 weeks, back to my
Ah,
homeland. I am
we're doing.
excuse me?
Are you there? Are you there for the Pope's visit? We're doing a lot of gigs leading up to the Pope's visit.
Oh, okay. Well, let me do a little introduction, and then we'll cut to you, Ciaron. My name is
Okay.
Kat McGuire, and I am Communications Director for Unity4J. I was recently appointed by Susie Dawson, and it's an extraordinary group. For those of you, if this is your very first time hearing, let me just repeat so that people know. An online vigil that is going on this weekend. It is the first weekend of every month, and that is Unity for the number 4J. And this is in support of Julian Assange, who has been held over 6 years in almost solitary at the Ecuadorian Embassy. So it's getting to critical point right now. And most of you really probably know this, and that's why you're here. But we are now going to move over to hear from Ciaron. Ciaron is, I would call him an activist. He is a consciousness raiser for the consciousness raisers. Ciaron has been on the front lines. He's from Australia, and it appears that all his life, I don't personally know Ciaron, but having followed some of his speaking on the Unity4J, I see that he has been doing a vigil right there at the embassy, which is where he is at right now. But throughout his past, he has been not just political activism, but on the front lines at soup kitchens as a Catholic worker. He has done protests, the type of protests against nuclear weapons. He has faced jail time. He is really an ally through and through and has been there all along. So he's also a friend, a personal friend of Julian Assange. Ciaron, first I'd like to know how it is doing a vigil right there at the embassy. And then I'd really like to know what it's like being a friend of Julian Assange.
Oh, okay. So it's 2 weeks today. About 4 hours ago, I embarked on this vigil, and it was actually during the Christian anarchist gathering at the Catholic Worker Farm, where we host 20 refugee women. Some women who got trafficked in as slaves or sex objects or workers, whatever the right phrase is, and also children, about 5 children. And so I was supposed to give a speech in the afternoon about entitled Julian Assange, the Detested Other. And I couldn't do it because I was, for whatever reason, requested, I guess, maybe by his dad, to come in here. So what I wanted to explore in that was, I'd just been, we're very active during the World Cup here, and I had a football shirt made with Australian football shirt. I put Assange on the back, where you usually put the player's name, and number 6 for 6 years. And I'd go into Australian pubs in London during the game, and a few of us would rush up and put an Australian flag, something I don't usually celebrate, but we've got the Union Jack in it, but up under the big TV screen. And because of the Australian flag, of course, no one would dare touch it, but also on the flag was Free Assange. So we turned these gatherings into kind of free Julian Assange things. And it reminded me of the biggest solidarity gathering we had in London was 400 people for Chelsea Manning, and that was a Jello Biafra gig. Jello Biafra had a band called the Guantanamo School of Medicine. And I know that's the shirt there, you can see it. And so I took Jello in to meet Julian, and And then later that night, he let us set up an info store for Chelsea Manning. This was just around the court-martial and sentencing. And Harrods security here. Okay, I'll just turn this thing down a bit. So this whole Jalabatra gig turned into a pro-Chelsea Manning rally, you know, so that was interesting. And so we went to what we thought was a televised football game between England and Sweden. Very hard to support that in the context of Julian Assange. So we turned up and we found ourselves in the middle of the gay parade, the Pride Parade. 30,000 or 50,000 at the gay parade. 50,000, right. So we'd come in our football shirts and yeah, probably a few gays interested in football, but not a whole lot. So we just stood there in Vigil, and watching the parade was interesting because I'm Irish Australian. And it reminded me, the Pride Parade in London reminded me of St. Patrick's Day for a number of reasons. One is a corporate takeover. So St. Patrick's Day, Guinness, the company Guinness, own St. Patrick's Day. Just like Coca-Cola transformed Santa Claus's suit into red and owned Christmas, Guinness owns St. Patrick's Day. And you really got to look at the list of the corporate sponsors of the Pride Parade in London. It includes British Aerospace, who are big weapon salesmen, women to Saudi Arabia. And of course, gays there, I would think, are executed. Here comes the few sounds now. So it was kind of ironic. And I thought here you got two groups, the Irish in England, the tested other, as recently as the 70s and 80s, when people like the Birmingham Six and the Guildford Four and the Maguire Seven, totally innocent of anything to do with armed Republican struggle, were framed, tortured. You know, you think of Vincent Maguire, only 14, and his mother did 11 years. And all they did was offer Giuseppe Conlon a bed for the night, one night. And before he could go to bed, the Brits were there, raided the house, arrested the whole family. Giuseppe had come over to get his son a lawyer. Giuseppe was a pacifist, ordinary, decent person. And his son, Jerry, who just passed away. Jerry, I knew Jerry, and it was a bit of a, what you say in Liverpool, a scally, and probably a little bit involved in petty crime. So Jerry had to get out of Belfast because the Provisional IRA threatened to kneecap him because of his petty crime. He came to London and was in a squat, and he was the most unlikely person to be a member of the Provisional IRA, which is a very military, disciplined, short haircut kind of group. And he did 16 years in jail, Jerry, and his father died in jail. This is the British justice system that gave us habeas corpus. This is the British justice system that has Julian Assange and central deprivation ongoing. This is the British justice system that has nothing on Julian Assange. They have a breach of bail with no charge. And this is Julian Assange, who has never published anything untrue.
Well, Ciaron,
yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. What do you think if the British...
Okay, I'll just finish this point very quickly.
Okay.
And then you've got two groups, the Irish and the gays, who recently were detested others, who have now been mainstreamed and corporate sponsored. And that the behaviour of both the Irish on St. Patrick's Day and a lot of the gays at the Pride Parade were like enacting the worst stereotypes the state had of hypersexual, will screw anything gay people, and Irish people who are totally committed to getting blind drunk. You watch the young people at both these events, and you know, this helps you understand why the lack of support for Julian Assange, the lack of, when you're in a city of London where nearly 2 million people marched against the war and the invasion on Iraq, which Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange exposed, and that you can only get myself down here or a couple of people to stand in solidarity and vigil. It needs some kind of analysis, you know, it really does. And the cynicism of people is a cover for their cowardice and their laziness. The intellectual laziness, even though they're hyper-educated, they're intellectually lazy. They might be academics, but they're not intellectuals. And we remember what Chomsky said during the Vietnam War, is that academics are paid to be silent. If they're not silent, they lose their jobs. And you look at Mr. Finkelstein, who's been blacklisted in the United States. Now that's someone who's refused to be silent, just like Julian Assange, and he's had consequences. And of course, Julian has terrible, terrible consequences. The British are not that upset with Julian. He hasn't done too much in exposure of the Brits. They are totally subservient to the United States of America. They used to be the center of a great empire. The sun never set. Now they're an aircraft carrier for the United States. And you know, you can say the same of Ireland. I grew up in Irish republicanism, celebrating the struggles of 1916. And you know, in our house, we were very sympathetic to the Provisional IRA for fighting back after the Paras and the SAS were killing our people unarmed in civil rights marches, until I became a pacifist at 17. Now, the Irish government are totally subservient to the United States. We're a neutral country in Ireland, yet we have a hub at Shannon Airport that most US troops that invaded Iraq in that illegal invasion, according to the UN, the immoral invasion, according to the Pope, they were refueled and stopped over in neutral Ireland. So that shows you how subservient, how corrupt, how collaborating the Irish government is, even though they have the rhetoric of anti-imperialism, the rhetoric of republicanism, and the Brits, of course, they celebrate themselves the great legal. The reason we have juries in America and Ireland and Australia, and they don't have it in Holland or Germany or Sweden, is that it comes out of the British system. And the jury system is a good system. I've been on trial 4 times, and I'd rather face theoretically the conscience of the community than some co-opted public school boy here in England. So yeah, so they've betrayed their own beliefs. They, in a habeas corpus, produce the body. If bail should be related to a charge. The only thing, if Julian steps out of this building or gets thrown out of this building by collaborating Ecuadorians, or at the worst case scenario, the SAS come into this building and drag him out or shoot him unarmed, and that's not unprecedented for the SAS. The SAS killed the sister of a friend of mine in Gibraltar. She was unarmed, never had a weapon on her all day. They had the option of handcuffing her behind the back. They preferred to put a bullet in the head of Marie Farrell, you know? And the last time they went into an embassy here in London in 1979, the Iranian embassy, the people who'd taken that embassy and was holding hostages had put down their weapons, were lying in a prostrate position. The SAS could have handcuffed them, but they put bullets in the back of their heads. And the SAS, my godson was in the SAS in Iraq. The Brits were in Basra. The SAS weren't. They were in Baghdad under American command. They didn't even have a British commanding officer. This is the elite of the British military, who are so proud of how elite they are, were subservient to the Americans to such an extent that they gave their elite corps, the SAS, to the Yanks. And now my godson would chop her out every second night, third night. His job was to put an explosive on the wall of a family home. They'd go into that home, they'd pick up all computers, currency, they'd take all the men, anyone from 15 to 60. They'd hood them, they'd cuff them, they'd put them on choppers, and they'd chopper them back to Baghdad. When they got back to Baghdad, that's when their job was over. They put them in a line, and the Yanks took over. They walked down that line and said, I want that one, I want that one. The ones they didn't want went to Abu Ghraib. Abu Ghraib was minimum security. The ones they wanted went to black sites and were tortured, and some were killed. Now that's the subservience of the British. They gave their elite squad to the Yanks, you know? And now the Brits and the Yanks they're empires. You know, the Brits empire, it's based on the balkanization of the Middle East. They create these royal families, and they're walking by me right now here on Hans Crescent, from Qatar to Saudi Arabia. I don't want to offend them because they could have me killed. It'd be pocket change. They balkanized the Ottoman Empire, and they created royal families, and they put British advisors. Now it used to be India. And if you look at the history of World War II, with Oliver Stone for defense, the Brits didn't open a second front in Europe. The Russians did all the fighting, the Yugoslavs did all the fighting. They begged for the Brits and the Yanks to open that second front. Where were the Brits? Where were the Australians? They were in North Africa defending their trade routes to India. India, the plunder of India. And the Brits get praised for building the railways. Why did they build the railways? Not to move Indians around, but to move all the wealth out, you know? And this city is built on the plunder of India. Now, they lost India, so they had to balkanize the Middle East, and that's ongoing. And I'm here in a street that has burkas by day and high-class prostitutes at night. And this is where all the Saudi boys come from their oppressive society you know, to have fun and games, to do things that are quite un-Islamic and un-Christian. And it's a very short street. Alex Cox made that observation, the punk rock director from Repo Man and Sid Vicious, Sid and Nancy. He was here and he said, "This is an amazing street." He's a director. He's got an eye, you know. And so what we're doing at the moment, we think the situation is elevated. Definitely when the police come, and it's unusual for the police to be armed in Britain. I think the Robin Williams skit about that. But it'll either be the SAS and or it'll be the armed embassy squad. Now the armed police in London have a long history of shooting unarmed people, usually black or Irish, or people they mistake for being black or Irish. They put 9 bullets in the head of Mendez, Carlos Mendez, as he was seated on a tube at Stockwell, because they mistook him. You know, the elite 14 company to do their intelligence gathering thought this Brazilian was a Pakistani. Weeks after the tube bombings in 97 or something like that, or 2007, yeah. So they put 9 bullets into the head of the Brazilian that thought Pakistani. You know, so
Ciaron, may I ask a question?
They're the people who'll be dealing with Julian Assange, and so we're calling for the Pope to intervene, and we think that's a high possibility because the Pope often intervenes in American executions, and there's a precedent. Sorry,
Ciaron,
worked up. I'm a bit sleep deprived, you know.
All right. Well, you certainly have a lot of information to convey to people. Being right there and that wonderful history you gave of how the Brits don't protect anybody. They have no qualms about killing IRA people, whoever. What do you feel is going to be Julian's chances when he comes out, that they might not have some kind of sniper there? Can he request to have some kind of body armor? What are you feeling about that? Just the danger of even being out in the street and they either they set it up or some crazed person, quote unquote crazed person that they always seem to find.
Well, the basic fear of Julian, or we have for Julian, because Julian is pretty fearless, and Julian is also one of the most freest people I've ever met, you know. And yeah, so the basic thing is it's the American-driven extradition. And if they don't kill him here, or they don't rape him here, I've been in the American prison system. It's so easy, even the Australian prison system, to set you up for rape or killing. You look at the Stratfor leaks, they celebrate him saying he'll make a nice bride in jail. What do you think that means? You know, the use of rape and the fear of rape in prison as control. I've spent 2 years in a variety of prisons. Is ever present for the prisoner. Now, the Brits, it was interesting with the Chinese because, you know, they're the over. We just want him out of here, okay? There's the door, Ed. Take it, right? And it was Julian Assange and Sarah Harrison that saved Ed Snowden. The Guardian, the scumbags they are, left Snowden there. Now, the Guardian are weaponizing Julian Assange's disability. Julian admits that he may be on the Asperger's spectrum. Okay, I don't know if you've heard that before. And the Guardian, supposed to be liberals, are using someone's disability, I don't know if that's the correct word, or a different way of being in the world, to present him as a narcissist, as unfriendly. Now, when I was a child, and I thought as a child, I'd run into people I later found out were autistic. And my attitude to them was, they're a bit up themselves. They're not friendly. They're kind of elitist, right? Because they didn't have the same communication skills with the footballers I mixed with. And when I became an adult and learned about autism and befriended people on the spectrum, and it's a pretty broad spectrum. He's obviously very high functioning. My friend Chris Goodchild, he's written 2 books about his own Asperger's, and he, you know, he's not in town at the moment, but I want him to come down and address how the Guardian and others are weaponizing Asperger's, right, and against Julian. And anyone who's anything to do with the disability movement, the L'Arche movement, should be enraged. Just like my other friend Robbie Sinnott, the great piano player in Dublin, he's blind. And that'd be like weaponizing Robbie's visual impairment against him to put him in jail, you know. The other thing is the talk of Julian's mental health, you know. Mr. Hunt, got to be careful how I pronounce that name, he took over from Boris Johnson about a week ago, and he's expressing concerns about Julian Assange's mental health. Now, what's that playing a platform for is being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And I went through this myself. I co-founded Giuseppe Conlon House in London in 2010. At the end of 2010, I was at Julian's first court appearance. And I had to think, I thought for 24 hours, because of these accusations in Sweden, do I put the limited credibility I have behind this guy? And I looked at the case, and I looked at how much jeopardy was in, and as the rest of the liberal left and my Catholic worker, so-called Catholic worker community, fled Julian Assange and fled Chelsea Manning, I put my last 8 years of my life behind those two, right? And now the priest who, and it's ridiculous because a Catholic work is a lay movement. The clerics should have nothing to do with it. And the Pope himself warns us against the evil of clericalism. And obviously, you know, the whole pedophilia, which is a bullshit word. Pedophilia means love of children. I don't know, you know, the priest I had when I was an altar boy raping my contemporaries, I don't think he loved children too much, you know. I think he loved himself a bit. So you move away. So this priest moved against me in 2013. He had meetings with people saying the only way he could extract me from that building, it was an old church building, was to use the Mental Health Act in Britain. And all they have to say is you're a harm to yourself and others. So this is, you know, the sort of dog whistle that Mr. Hunt thinks that we can't hear. When he expresses, he has no compassion at all for Julian Assange or the people he murders in Yemen on a daily basis. So when he expresses concern for the mental health of Julian Assange, that's a preparation for the use of the Mental Health Act to extract Assange from this building. You can extract anyone from any building in London if you section them. And whether it's with the SAS or the armed police or you know, we know the previous private security company was firing on Julian in the embassy. However he lands in that hallway, hopefully alive, hopefully not too injured, that is one means they have legally of compromising all the tradition. I don't know if it's law or just tradition. I think Peter Tatchell said it was tradition of of diplomatic immunity, and to go into that building. So Julian's an Ecuadorian citizen. You'd think that would hamper the president, who was here recently, secretly meeting with the Brits about Julian. You'd think that would hamper him betraying one of his own citizens, one would think. So you got to watch out for the Mental Health Act.
Thank you so much. Why do you think when people came out for the war, what is your feeling of why there is this apathy? Is it solely the media programming people, or they don't see the important higher issues? And when you were at the soccer game in Jelly Biafra and actually interacting with people, Why is there such apathy now? What is your feeling?
I think a couple of things spring to mind. Is that music drowning it out, or is that all right?
It's
Is the
okay.
music
You're talking loud
okay?
enough.
Yeah. There's good things and bad things about that. Okay, so some things that spring to mind is, now Julian is really hyper intelligent, right? People like Dawkins and Chomsky. A lot of those people aren't accessible to the ordinary people in the street, and are a bit estranged from the popular touch and popular culture. And that's why people such as Jimmy Dore, now I can relate to Jimmy because he's from a big Irish Catholic family. He had 10 of his. And so it doesn't require me any transcendence to relate to Jimmy Dore. Like, I'm working class. My father was a postman. Mother worked in laundry. I'm not from a big family. There's only 3 of us. But Jimmy, he translates for Julian Assange. He makes Julian Assange a lot more accessible to people. And so, Bill Hicks and all these people, I think Jimmy Dore said recently, quoting Oscar Wilde, he said, if you tell people the truth and don't make them laugh, they'll want to kill you. Okay, so maybe that was Julian's mistake. He didn't make them laugh enough. And Julian can be very funny. Like, he's quite self-depreciating. And I'll give you one example. The last day I spent in Giuseppe Coleman House, I organised a little gathering for Chelsea Manning's aunt and uncle, who were about to fly to visit Chelsea and Leavenworth. And we had just connected with them after the court-martial, and we raised money for their airfares. They'd been 3 times before with no support from Stop the War Coalition. They would have taken millions of pounds on that big march. And all they've done is set themselves up in cozy jobs for 15 years where they don't have bosses. They know nothing about solidarity. They find anyone who's at all militant a threat to their gig, So we raised the money. I remember one way we raised the money, they had a Rugby League World Cup final, and I went into the embassy and Julian was quite sick. He had the flu, but I forced him to sign a rugby league ball. And I said, we're going to raffle this and raise money for the Mannings. And I remember I think he wrote J. Assange, and he was sick, and I handed the ball back and I said, I want the full name, Julian, so, and we raffled that and we raised over £1,000 for a £15 football. And Julian knows about solidarity. It's not all about him. Edward Snowden is only at liberty today because of Julian Assange and Sarah Harrison. Julian Assange did a lot for Chelsea Manning, and Chelsea Manning, who's not out of the name Julian Assange in a year. And you've got to ask the question, who is surrounding Chelsea Manning? Who is weaponizing Chelsea Manning's silence against Julian Assange? Because I know Chelsea Manning's family. They're authentic, working class people, And maybe Chelsea should call home like ET, and get back into contact with who Chelsea Manning is, and not be surrounded by hyper wealthy people who want to use Chelsea as a celebrity commodity to make money and to make status and to use against Julian Assange. So we wait for this 3rd film, the trifecta. The woman who did Citizen 4 and won an Oscar, can't think of a name at the moment. I hope that's insulting. Second, who recut Risk and weaponized it against Julian Assange. And now I'd assume there's going to be an anti-Assange Chelsea Manning as the trifecta, the 3rd one, coming out on Showtime real soon. I'll be surprised if it isn't. Now, Chelsea's about to do a tour of Australia. Chelsea should meet some Australians before Chelsea goes there, because if Chelsea thinks she can do a tour of Australia without talking about an Australian publisher that her government is prosecuting and persecuting because her military, and I don't know if Chelsea's disassociated herself from the glorious history of the US military in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and everywhere else, is persecuting. So if Chelsea thinks she can do a tour and not talk about Julian Assange, Chelsea's very naive. And my advice as a friend of her family's is maybe you should cancel that tour, and maybe you should go to Wales instead and hook up with your aunts and uncles and your mother who really love you, not these people who are exploiting you. That's my message to Chelsea Manning. And I can say that because I too was a former prisoner of the United States. And I'm a probable future prisoner of the United States, okay? And that's a message that needs to be said, and only a few people can say that, okay? And I've said it. So I hope you're listening, Chelsea. And we all love you. We've had lots of gigs for you in Ireland and Wales and England. Jello Baffa did a great job for you in London. Is the bradleymanning.org website, has that been totally airbrushed out of history? Because most support for Chelsea Manning came from Vietnam veterans and military people, and right on the cusp, in the December before he, Obama, commuted sentence, was handed over to trans activists. I didn't see a lot of them in London doing much. I know that Chelsea was made Grand Marshal of Gay Parade, and that the Democrat gays came in and took that status off her. Chelsea, I know that if that website does not exist, that is really significant. That's like Stalin airbrushing Trotsky out of history. And that's about recreating history. And that's about the manipulation, exploitation of the prisoner. Now, Chelsea did tough time in Quantico. That's a quote. That's a quote by Obama, which admits we tortured Chelsea, you know. But Leavenworth, I'd rather do Leavenworth than I did Pecos County Jail. There were 140 of us in a room. I was the only white boy in the jail. There were a lot of people with resentment to white boys, understandably, in such a racist society as the United States. I was on the only African football team in that jail. I scored a lot of goals on corner kicks and headers because I'm taller than the average Mexican. But whenever we played, we had 400 Mexicans screaming racist abuse at us. It was quite atmospheric. Now, I had to watch my back for 9 months. My back, my front, my head, my feet. Chelsea Manning, her own cell, you know. That's comfortable. There's a Billy Bragg lyric that goes, when one man, one cell was a Victorian value. They tripled up here in England. Chelsea Manning was working in the kitchen at Leavenworth. There's a lot of sharp knives and objects in the kitchen, and I was happy to hear that Chelsea felt secure, because I initially thought, geez, Chelsea's an environment with a lot of people who lost friends in Afghanistan and Iraq to the Taliban, and the lie about Chelsea is she's a friend of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda for exposing war crimes. And I thought but what I've read of Chelsea's prison experience, Chelsea did very well in jail, and I mean that in a very good way. That she transcended her own subjectivity, and she's hyper intelligent and sophisticated, and a lot of people in jail aren't. And she so transcended that and reached out to very working class. Oh, she's working class, that's her background. Her grandfather was from Dublin. She's from the Irish diaspora. And she's well loved in Ireland, and we're waiting for her to come to Ireland. So my suggestion is cancel the Australian-speaking tour if you don't want to talk about Julian Assange, and come to Ireland for an ease up, and come and join us as we go and see the Pope as a delegation. It'd be great to have Chelsea on that delegation, as we ask the Pope to come to Hans Crescent and to escort Julian Assange to a place of safety, which is not England and not Australia, that are so subservient to the United States, and no longer Ecuador. This building behind me was once a sanctuary for Julian Assange. It has turned into a trap with the change of presidency. So to watch a building transform from a place of, and I've been in that building a lot with Julian, and we had a lot of laughs. I was going to tell you about one of those laughs. And so I bring in Chelsea's aunt and uncle, and they're the conservative branch of the family, and they're into the Queen's speech each year that Susan, Chelsea's father, keeps destroying by yelling at things on the TV. So they're not a homogenous political family. Anyway, the uncle by marriage says, it must have been very difficult for Chelsea to change schools when she was 11. And Julian goes, I went to 37 schools. And I said, yeah, you turned out all right, didn't you, mate? You know? And he went, oh, well, you know. So he's got a self-depreciating humour. When I went in with Chelsea's working class uncle and aunt, I was a bit worried that, you know, Julian's not working class, he's bohemian. He's not middle class, he's not aristocracy. He's from the artistic, his mother's a puppeteer. He didn't meet his dad till he was 22. But once you meet Julian's dad and meet Julian, it's a pretty good argument for genetics. They're very similar, okay? And John Shipton and both Christine Assange separately have done great work for their child and continue to do great work. And I hope they lead 2 different delegations to the Vatican. I hope John Shipton and myself and Diego Maradona. I think if we get on to Diego, because the Pope is Argentinian, see? And in Argentina, they're very, very proud that the Pope is Argentinian. But when in Argentine, Maradona is God. Right? Pope is the Pope, but Maradona is God. And in England, there's a thing called the hand of God when Maradona punched a goal in against England at the World Cup. So, and he did that following the Falklands War and the Malvinas War. So I think Diego's still got a few outstanding issues with the British government, and he wouldn't mind supporting Julian Assange. So if anyone can get a message to Maradona to join our delegation, that would be great. And Christine can go with Jen Robinson, our lawyer, an actress. Now the Pope, he will intervene. This is the good Pope. The Jesuit Pope means he's right, okay? And also, in the history of the papacy, years, when he was 17, after being used in child porn films and being raped by animals, he crossed the road and raped and killed an elderly nun. Now her family begged for his life. The religious order begged for his life. 16 bishops begged the liberal feminist Anne Richards for this man's life. The Pope rang up and begged Anne Richards for that man's life, and Anne Richards, as she did every month, executed him. And George
We seem to have lost Ciaron. Are technical people aware? Ciaron is quite a character, and the level of commitment to be out there every day on the front lines, for Ciaron to be out there in an actual in-person vigil every day is just super incredible. And we really have to, oh, here, it looks like we have the connection back. He is quite the activist. He's full of information, but his real value add is just to be this in-person character. Ciaron, if you can hear me, I'm interested to know if they move Julian. He's talking, but I can't seem to hear him. Do we have some technical help here?
Yeah, Ciaron doesn't actually have a microphone on his profile right now, so I don't know what has happened on his end.
Okay. Well, somehow we've lost Ciaron, but he is just a wonderful activist, and I really was looking forward to hearing more about his personal interactions with Julian. We get so much mediated through media or interviews, but Ciaron is right there and has been a good friend of Julian's. And I suspect wherever they move Julian, he's going to be right there as well, to be the eyes, on the ground eyes, and his that Irish spirit, the fighting Irish. They're not going to put Ciaron down. I imagine if, heaven, God forbid, that Julian comes to the U.S., I could see Ciaron coming and being that frontline visual. He's a frontline person. We all have our concerns and prayers, and sending energy to Julian that he be able to face this extremely difficult time. This is a historic event in world history right now. In the United States, it probably has not been since John Peter Zenger in the 1700s had to stand up for freedom of the press. And that's what the United States is always known for. And so now this Orwellian flip-flop into totalitarian tactics, and all under the guise of democracy. We had real democratic fighters like John Peter Zenger, and Julian Assange is going to go down in history as part of that tradition of fighting for
you're coming back now. Can you hear me over there?
Yes, Ciaron, we can. We
Okay,
lost
hopefully,
you.
hopefully that's doing a bit of swearing.
Well, Ciaron,
Can I just finish? Can I just finish
please
the
go
point I was
ahead.
making? Quickly? So there's a history of papal intervention. If people think it's unreal that the SAS or armed police won't go in and shoot an unarmed man, they're very naive, like Chelsea going to Australia. If they think the Pope won't intervene or can't, they're naive, because the Pope, in this case of the rape and death of an elderly nun, begged for the life, and you know, Anne Richards, who then went on to chair the Democrat convention that nominated Bill Clinton for the first time in Philadelphia, I think it was, or New York. She was no embarrassment at all to the Democrat Party, even though she was executing people once a month. When George Bush got in, he doubled it. He was executing every 2 weeks. And the students would go down to death row and they'd have beer parties. I mean, how barbarian is that, you know? But also, when Bobby Sands was dying on hunger strike, and the British government, the same British government that has now got Julian Assange under their thumb, when Bobby Sands was dying, the British government was saying, oh, he's committing suicide. Now, what did the Pope do? The Pope dispatched his papal nuncio from London and took Bobby Sands and gave him a pair of rosary beads. Now, that was a dog whistle, if there ever was a dog whistle, because traditionally the Catholic Church frowns upon suicide. For a long time, if you committed suicide, you couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. I'm not saying that was the right thing to do. I'm saying that's a long history of that. Now, by giving Bobby Sands a pair of rosary beads, the Pope was saying, I know this is not a suicide. You know, I know you've been driven to this by the oppression of the British who've occupied our country for 800 years. So in this case, Bobby Sands was caught with a weapon. Bobby Sands wasn't a pacifist. Neither was Nelson Mandela, even though they're rewriting history. Julian Assange has never picked up a weapon, to my knowledge. He's an easy case for the Pope to intervene. He hasn't raped a nun. He hasn't killed anyone. He's not on, you know, as these people the Pope has intervened with before. He has not carried a weapon like Bobby said.
We have a bit of a slowdown here. We've lost Ciaron again.
Thank God. I'm terrible at names.
Right.
I'm very good under police interrogation because I never remember a name. Anyway, he just did a documentary on the Pope, and in the credits he thanked Julian Assange. Now, that's interesting. And the quote the Ecuadorian government first put up when they had a good president, that was a while ago, promoting what they're granting asylum, it was a quote from scripture, and that was, the truth will set you free. Okay? The quote from Gospels. And that's the banner, one of the 3 banners will be taken to Dublin with us, free Julian Assange. Now, the Pope, I think, like most people, now Julian, the 2 people I've met in my life who've been the most fearless, I've said this before, lived with a lot of refugees from East Timor, Africa, Iraq, Syria, fleeing the brutality of the edge of empire. And I can understand why they flee. I can understand why they had to leave their loved ones. Now, Julian Assange and Phil Berrigan, who I lived with for a year, they run into the headlights of empire. Now, Phil did 13 years in jail for non-violent anti-war activity. Julian will do a lot more to drag him out of this embassy. They're the 2 characters I know who are the most fearless that I've met personally. And also, Julian Assange is the person in human history that has pissed off the most amount of powerful people in the shortest amount of time. Now, Jesus Christ tried his best, but didn't have the reach, didn't have the technological reach. And also, similar to the Berrigans, Julian Assange goes from hero to zero in the fastest speed possible. From 2010, full spectrum dominance, Time magazine celebrated. Julian Assange was well placed to be a leader of a generation. And they put their best and the brightest on him to work out how do you marginalize this character. And they did that to the Berrigans. They were essentially placed amongst 50 million Catholics. They were on the front page of Time magazine too in 1968. So there was a meeting between J. Edgar Hoover and Richard Nixon at the West Coast White House. This is historic fact. and they decided to destroy the Berrigans. And they came up with the bullshit charge of conspiracy to kidnap Henry Kissinger based on love letters between Father Phil Berrigan and Sister Liz McAllister. Now, where is Sister Liz McAllister today? She's in a county jail in Georgia after trying to disable the Trident nuclear weapon system. And we'll be taking her name to Ireland, to the Pope as well, along with Colin Roddy and Dave Donlan, who wait trial in Dublin for non-violent resistance at Shannon Airport. So it's all about solidarity. Not all of us have to go to jail. Not all of us have to be locked in a room for 6 years. But when one of our brothers and sisters are before the courts, or in handcuffs, or in jail, or under threat, we need to be love bombing them. We need to be surrounding them with whatever gifts we've got. And I've got a young woman here from Slovakia who understands mobile phones and tech. That's the only reason we're having this conversation. Like my preferred medium is a cardboard sign and standing in the street and talking to strangers. I get totally flustered doing these things, but because she's here, I'm less stressed. And she's intervened about 8 times during this interview to keep this interview alive. Down the corner at the Vigil, got 2 artists, and my drawings on my placards are pretty illegible. But I can give them what I want on a placard, and they can make me a nice placard. And for them, it's stress-free. That's what they're good at, you know? Yeah.
Ciaron, we're glad that you're surrounded by allies there who are helping you. That's great. And hopefully at the next Vigil, you will be able to bring some of those people on with you. But we are now moving to the next segment. We're going to the next segment, and we're going to say goodbye to you. Graham Elwood is our next speaker. Thank you, Ciaron, so much, and keep up your great spirit.
Thank you. I'm sorry for not letting you talk too much.
No, you're precious. You're unique. Okay.
But I'll definitely see you in Ireland. I'll be there in 2 weeks, hopefully. But the nature of the Vigil will change. It's not all about me. It's about a 24/7 presence. And I'm
Excellent.
like the Marines at Iwo Jima on the beachhead for the others to follow who'll take over this role. Okay.
Well, I'll get
see you
in
in
touch
Ireland. Okay.
I'll see you in Ireland.
Yeah,
okay.
Have your people talk to my people. See you.
Okay. Bye, Ciaron.